They better watch out. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I am so glad you are here. God is so good to us. John chapter 21. John chapter 21. We've just been kind of going through these accounts and trying to follow the Holy Spirit and seeing how personable they are in the life of the Lord Jesus, in the life of the disciples, in the life of the women that followed Christ, but also, especially in our lives, that these things become clear to us as we have various experiences and various crosses and various relationships to the Lord. Sometimes we, like Peter, we need the Lord to take us to task. Sometimes, like Mary Magdalene, we need God to straighten us out. But He is so kind and gracious in doing it that we rejoice in God's control of us and His direction of us. We have seen in John chapter 20 how He appeared to the disciples in verse 19 with the door shut, then in verse 26 again on the first day of the week with the door shut, and now we're going to see Him not in an enclosed room for fear of the Jews, but out in the open at the Sea of Galilee, openly fishing, going back to doing that which they had done prior to His calling them. And we see He has as yet to address Peter personally. Let's start, hold your place, Matthew chapter, 4 and verse 16? You don't know. You don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah. Matthew chapter 4 and verse 18. Matthew 4:18. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea. Now the Lord had a spiritual awareness of what that meant, because He's the one that invented nets, water, and fish, and invented Peter too. So casting net into the sea, He was seeing them as preparing them to cast the gospel net into the sea of humanity. For they were fishers. That's what God made them to be in order to bring them on. And He said unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. So we have a parable about a net cast into the sea and bringing in all kinds of fish. And the fishermen sitting down and casting out the bad fish and keeping the good fish. And He said, that's the gospel. And we'll send out the gospel net, preach the gospel to every creature. Many will be called. A lot of people get in the net, but few are chosen. A lot of them be cast away, but these will be saved. He said, and they straightway left their nets and followed Him. That was a verbal contract. And by doing what He said, follow me, they made an agreement and a contract with God. But we get over to chapter 21 of John, and we don't know what happened between the last time that the Lord appeared and told Thomas to reach hither thy finger and so forth. And He left with a saying that blesses our hearts in John 20 and verse number 29. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. So this thing, He sees it as going on throughout the age of the gospel of those like us, as Peter said, whom having not seen, but we love Him. So we don't know exactly what happened as far as John's writings are concerned. What got Peter to the state of boredom, aggravation? Well, I don't know. That he finally, with 7 of them in chapter 21 and verse 2, with a total of 7 apostles, including him, he just says, I'm going fishing. And there's 2 theys in verse number 3 of John 21. They said unto him, we also go with thee. They went forth and entered into a ship immediately, and that night they caught nothing. So we find that the influence of one who has been involved with God, has had some spiritual experiences, but comes now to walk away from it, is very influential in leading other people out away from God, and this is how all of our religions in the world have got started. You be careful. Don't follow any man, but only as he follows the Lord. Amen. Don't tie your salvation on any man's coattail. You follow the Lord. Now, the last part of verse number 3 of chapter 21, it said they entered into a ship immediately, and what's the rest of it? Now, so this encounter with the apostles is going to take place when? All you got to do is read the first phrase in verse number 4 of John 21.
But when the morning was now come.
I've always thought that the feeding of the disciples, when Jesus said, "Come and dine," was what I call supper time. It was breakfast. The last part of verse 3, that night they caught nothing, but when the morning was now come, so we see that what's fixing to happen happens in the morning. Now, I don't know about you, but I have had fried chicken and gravy for breakfast. But I never have had fish and bread for breakfast. But that's what they're fixing to have. I don't know. Maybe you knew it was breakfast. I didn't know it. I read it. I saw it said the night they caught nothing, in the morning, and then when he put bread and fish on the live coals in verse 9, I don't know what happened to my brain. It just automatically switched over to supper time. Verse 5, then Jesus said unto them, "Children," remember that, "have you any meat?" They answered him, "No." Now, they don't know who Jesus is. How do you know? Because of the last part of verse 4. But the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. So we told you Sunday, you can get in such a condition, like Peter and these guys did, walking away from God, not doing what he told you to, getting bored with religion. I'm tired of it. I'm going back to my old life. I'm going back into fishing business, to where you don't have any idea of how easy it would be to follow somebody with any kind of authority that walks up to you and says, "Now you ought to do this." You say, "Well, that sounds good." They didn't know who Jesus was. A perfect stranger, as far as they were concerned, walks up and, okay, maybe he's a customer. He's going to buy some fish. "You got any fish?" They said, "No." Well, that's well and good. But he goes on and says, "Cast your net on the right side, and you shall find." They cast, therefore. Wherefore? Because a total stranger told them to. Why? Because they got in such a state and in such a condition of being away from God, being contrary to his will. "My soul hath no pleasure in them that draw back." Peter said, "I'm going back to the fishing business." They were in such a state. They had toiled all night, and dear soul, don't expect anything to happen good when you walk away from the Lord. Two things you need to know: it was dark, and they were not successful. We toiled all night. It gets dark when you walk away from God. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you will take anybody's word or suggestion, and next thing you know, you're in bad shape. But it just so happened, therefore, it was the Lord and it was his purpose, because in this account, he is about to deal with Peter. He has yet to confront Peter. He did Thomas on that second time that he appeared to him. but he has not confronted Peter. Now, if you knew that you had denied somebody that had been your very close friend, and you walked away from him, you not only didn't help him, but you threw him to the wolves and made sure that the Roman government got their hands on him and put nails in him. And not only that, but you cursed and swore that you didn't know him and that he had nothing to do with you. If all of a sudden that man is now in your presence, and he's in the presence of these witnesses that know that you have pledged yourself to him, where would you be in those two accounts in John 20 in the upper room when Jesus just appeared in the room and the door was locked? I'd be over there hiding in the coat, where they hang the coats on the wall. I'd be over there covering myself. I'd get as far away from Jesus as I could. Peter has not yet been dealt with. Matthew 26 and verse 33. Matthew 26 and verse number 33. Peter answered and said unto him, unto Jesus, though all should be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. And you were one of the worst. In fact, you were up there on the same level with Judas Iscariot. And God sent him to hell for what he did. The only thing kept Peter from being Judas was Christ's prayer. Yeah. Peter, Satan has desired to have you, but I have prayed for you that thy faith fail you not. Dear soul, the greatest thing ever happened to me and you was Jesus Christ interceding for us.
Amen.
John chapter 13 and verse 37. John 13 and verse 37. In verse 36, Jesus has said to Peter personally, specifically, whither I go, thou canst not follow me now, but thou shalt follow me afterwards. Peter didn't know what that meant. Verse 37, Peter said unto him, Lord, why cannot I follow thee now? Would you finish it for me?
I will lay down my life for thy sake.
Did he? No. So you got to know that he really meant that as far as he was concerned. But that was his problem. God had to deal with Peter's self-deception. He had yet to be broken and brought down to the place to understand that Jesus wasn't his servant, but he was to be Jesus' servant. And here he was, the most boisterous one, most vocal one, the one pushing out in front, be the one to lead. And that got him in a lot of trouble because there wasn't no way that he could hide now because he made these statements. Everybody in the whole world could betray you, but not me. There ain't no place you can go, Lord Jesus, that I won't follow you. I'll lay down my life for you. And that kind of bragging had put him out in front of everybody. He can't deny it. It's on the front page of the paper. And Jesus has yet to speak to him. Spoke to Mary Magdalene. Spoke to Thomas. Spoke to some of the women. But here he is. He waits till Peter gets himself in more trouble. I'm going fishing. Let's get out of this room. I'm tired of hiding up here. Let's go back to normal. Let's go back to doing what we used to do. And he led 6 other apostles with him. Here he is, as we would say, caught red-handed. Jesus catches him at this time. This is the mind and purpose of God for Peter. Verse number 6, cast the net on the right side of the ship, and you shall find. They cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. Therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved said to who? Peter. Now, how did he know that? How did John know that? The Holy Spirit brought it back to him. I will make you fishers of men. John said, that's the Lord. There ain't no way we professional fishermen could labor all night with the best of boats, the best of nets, the best of training. Our daddies trained us. We've been in the fishing business all of our life. We make our livelihood by fishing. There's no way that this could have happened and us not catch anything. You ever gone fishing and all you did was drown worms? Well, that's what they did, except it wasn't worms, it was a net. So John realizes it, and Jesus allows John to speak to Peter and said, I'm sure these 4 words pierced the heart of Peter, judging from his response. In John 21:7, it is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat unto him. Now if I was going to jump in the sea, I'd take off my coat. But I don't understand this lifestyle, so I'm just going to read you what the Bible said. He girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. That's kind of a drastic step, wasn't it? Would you be so kind as turn to Revelation 20 and verse number 11? What happens when you meet God not as your Savior, but as your judge? Would y'all read that for me? Revelation 20 and verse 11.
And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heavens fled away, and there was found no place for them.
The operative words in that verse that I want you to make sure and see comes after this phrase, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away. That was the relationship of Peter, hearing that it was the Lord and knowing that Mr. Hotshot Peter had been bragging all of their ministry. I'm the greatest. I'm number one. I will never leave you. I'll go where even you say I can't go, Lord. I am not going to. You're not going to leave me behind. I'm going to follow you no matter what. And then he denies him, swears and curses, says I don't know him. Cast him into the hands of the Roman government, and was instrumental in bringing forth, humanly speaking, the crucifixion of his dear master and friend, Jesus Christ. So the Lord has come. He's appeared to him. Nothing said to Peter. So he comes back the second time. Nothing said to Peter. Just to Thomas. It's kind of awkward being in the room with a former lover. And y'all are broken up and you don't want nothing else to do with one another. And now all of a sudden you got a wedding to go to or some other public thing that both of you have required to go to, and now you see one another. And the first thing you want to do is stay far away from them as you can. And that's Peter. But this time the Lord's not going to allow it, because he's got Peter chosen to be the first gospel preacher in the new kingdom above all other men. And this is that which was necessary to bring Peter to an end of himself, so that the Holy Spirit would not find any hindrances, and the Holy Spirit would not be quenched with his glorifying, with his lifting up of himself, with his self-deception, thinking he was greater than he was. Jesus said, I'm meek and lowly. Peter, you need to be too. And this is what God did to bring him down. Peter was guilty. There was no doubt that he was guilty. Everybody knew he was guilty. Peter knew he was guilty. John knew he was guilty. And the Lord wasn't going to talk to him. And he let him go to bed, sleeping every night, trying to, with all them thoughts in his mind, and seeing that woman's face, and said, thou art one of them, as he warmed himself with the world's fires and saw Jesus being led to be beaten again. He did cast himself into the sea. He fled away, in whose face the earth and heaven fled away, because he's on the throne of judgment now, and we're all guilty. Verse 8, and the other disciples came in a little ship, for they were not far from land, but as it were 200 cubits, dragging the net with fishes. And as soon as they were come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid thereon, and bread. They're going to eat fish, but it's not fish they caught, because they're going to be fishers of men. And I don't care who you are or what you say, you have never been the instrument that has saved a single soul. They said in Mr. Spurgeon's tabernacle, 5,500 seats. There was not a seat in the whole house where somebody hadn't got saved. But Spurgeon didn't save a one of them. If that story is true, God did it.
Amen.
And you may have to go to whale school, Jonah. And you may have to have seaweed wrapped around your face and your neck and be involved in the first submarine. But you're going to find out one thing. Jonah did. The Lord is the God of salvation. Salvation is of the Lord. That's what he come out saying. Salvation is of the Lord. So they're not going to eat their fish. He's going to show them that in your own energy, in your ministry as fishers of men, when it's night and you're not right with God, you're not going to accomplish nothing, just going to wear yourself out and have some real bad, dark times. But that's going to make you appreciate it when you have God, even as a stranger, come to you and say, cast the net on the other side. And then you're going to have so many fish you can't hardly drag them to shore. And you find out, not by might, personal might, individual might, nor by power, by collective power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Ye can do nothing without me. John 15:5. Jesus saith unto them, bring of the fish which ye have now caught. Why did he say now? Because he wanted to emphasize that you boys, the best fishermen there are in the best lake there is, you couldn't catch anything until I showed up. And now you can catch fish, but I don't want you to eat those fish. And here comes Peter, trying to make up, trying to kiss up, trying to act like everything's all right between him and Jesus. And then verse number 11, Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes. I can do it by myself. and 153, full of great fishes. And for all there were so many, yet was not the net broken. Jesus saith unto them, and in saying this, these next three words, he's going to be saying, Peter, put that net down. We don't need you. I already got it handled. And he says, come and dine. Come and dine, the master calleth. Come and dine. And one of the disciples durst ask, and none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? Knowing that it was the Lord. They all knew now. John knew first, but now all of them. Now this is the third time that Jesus showed himself to his disciples after that he was risen from the dead. What's the second word of verse 15?
When?
Doesn't that answer to a then? You say when? Well, we're going to do it then. I kind of think, you don't have to believe this, you don't have to think it is, but I kind of believe this was a quiet supper. Because it says, and when they had dined, Jesus saith. I think that the verse preceding this, none of the disciples dared ask him, who art thou? Knowing that it was the Lord. They didn't speak. They didn't say, we know who you are, or who are you, or where you been, or did you go up to heaven, or you still been hanging around earth, or they didn't dare ask him anything. So that sounds like they're quiet. And the when in verse number 15 sounds like nobody talked till Jesus talked after they got through eating. This thing is entirely in the hand of Jesus Christ. Bring the fish that you have now caught. Come and dine. He's in charge. So when they had dined for breakfast in silence, not yet used to where the church that had been raised up under Moses' law all these years, what are we doing? Where are we going? And as I say, you can read the 5th chapter of the Revelation, find John weeping, not knowing what was the institution of the church and how to act after this temple veil got split in two. So this is going to start the New Testament age. So when they had dined, Jesus saith to Simon Peter, not to anyone else. Peter, you're the one that led them astray and led them away from my ministry. You're the one that said, I'm going back to fishing business. I'm going to deal with you. Peter, you're the one that I told you couldn't go with me, but you got to say, I'm going to love you above all men. We need to take you to task, and we need to straighten you out. And there ain't nothing better than public humiliation to straighten out an ornery Baptist preacher.
Amen.
You had your shot. I don't know why you didn't take it. So when they had dined, Jesus saith to Simon Peter, Simon, call him by his first name, son of Jonas, making sure that Peter knew that Jesus was looking at him as purely earthly. He calls them children in verse number 5, and now he's calling Peter the son of Jonas. So he's bringing them down to the place where they knew they should be brought. And the first thing he brings up is love. Now, folk, in a relationship, This is all important. We read, God is love. He that loveth is born of God. He that loveth him that begat loves those that are begotten. And this is the kind of thing that the female of the union especially wants to know. Honey, do you love me? A woman will interrogate you. You can't stop it. You see a man and woman riding down the road in the car and the windows are fogged up. She's wanting to know, do you love me? Here we go. Ain't nothing you can do about it, fellas. You just have to suffer through it. Listen, and hope you give the right answer. Right, Brother Carl? You did good tonight. And then he asks a question. Not only lovest thou me, but he reminds him of Matthew 26 and 33. Lovest thou me more than these? Now, I have preached it in times past that he was talking about fishing. But I believe he was talking about these other disciples. Whichever way it is, I was right one time. And Peter said, though all men should forsake thee, I won't do it. So Jesus said, do you really love me more than these? Bringing the others in to bear on it as witnesses, knowing that they heard Peter say that. And Jesus was just dressing him down in a sweet and kind and loving way. He should have knocked him upside the head with a 2x4 and said, why did you deny me back there? Do you see what they did to me? But he didn't. He wanted to talk about love. Went to the source of the issue. Lovest thou me more than these? He, that is Peter, saith unto him, yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said, Lord, you're right getting on my case. Everything that I did, it's recorded, it's known, everybody knows about it. But one thing you know, more than anybody else in the whole world knows, you know that really in my heart, as bad as I acted, I really truly do love you. Jesus said, okay, since you agreed to the contract in Matthew 4:18, wherever it is along in there, that you'll be made fishers of men, here's what I want you to do. Feed my lambs. And Peter's thinking, whew, I'm glad that's over with. But it wasn't. He saith unto him again, the second time. This is the third time it says Jesus appeared to his disciples. Peter's going to have 3 times because he didn't say nothing to him first time, didn't say nothing to him second time. So he's going to make up for it. He's going to say, okay, the second time, Simon, and again, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? He saith unto him, yea, Lord, you know in my heart of hearts that I really love thee. And he said, feed my sheep. We're going from lambs to sheep, but we're also going from a Greek word in verse 15, feed. Guess what that word means? It means to feed. But the word in verse number 16 includes feeding, but it means to rule over. It's the same word shall rule in Matthew 2:6. So he's developing this thing gradually. He said, do you love me? Yea, Lord, you know that I love you. Then feed my little lambs. You need to come on down, Mr. High and Mighty. You need to condescend to men of low estate. If I'm going to be able to use you, you're going to have to be careful with those precious little newborn babies in the kingdom. You've had some experiences that have catapulted you into, oh, Mr. Big, sit on the right hand. I know about all this, that, and the other. He said, but you're going to have to learn how to be a nursing mother. So feed my little lambs. And then the next time he says, feed and rule over my sheep. You need to maintain that quality. He saith unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, again, reminding him of his humanity, lovest thou me? Now, this is where it really gets to Peter. Peter was grieved because he said unto him the third time, lovest thou me? He just thought it was getting ground into the dust, that he was just, God was being overbearing with him. But you know what? Peter didn't mind denying him 3 times. So Jesus didn't mind asking him 3 times if he really loved him. And Peter, do you understand that grief that's in your own heart now when I asked you the third time? Can you imagine what was in my heart as the perfect Son of God with nothing to shield my emotions? I felt every hurt, every pain, all points tempted. And so that grief in you translates to, Peter, how I must have felt when you denied me the third time. Though Jesus don't say it. This is not vengeance, but vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. But he's got to bring Peter to a place of personal grief. And now he says unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus saith unto him, feed my sheep. Now, truly, truly, verily, verily, I say unto thee, Peter, when thou wast young, you remember when you were young, and I told you in verse 15 to feed my lambs? You're going to have to recall how it was being a little child, being of a tender age. When thou wast young, like little lambs, you did what you wanted to. You girded yourself and walked whithersoever thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, I'm going to have you to have the whole gamut of human life experiences from young man to old man, so that you'll know how to deal with lambs and sheep. He didn't let Mary Magdalene go tell the apostles, the disciples, go tell my brethren, until she got it straight herself. And he ain't going to let Peter go preach until Peter gets it straight himself. You remember when that old uncle of yours was so mean and aggravating, and he just crushed you like powder when you was a little kid? I'm making that up. That's just an example. You got to remember and not do that to my people. And Peter wrote later, he said, we should not be lords over God's heritage. He learned his lesson. When thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee and carry thee whither thou wouldest not. This spake he, signifying by what death he should glorify God. And when he had spoken this, Peter was so glad to hear these next 2 words. He saith unto him the same 2 words he said in Matthew 4, follow me. Now that we got all this straightened out, see how hard it is to make a servant of God? You got to put up with all of his bragging and all of his carrying on while you understand and know that Peter don't understand and know anything. But you don't say anything to him. You just let him go. Let him get himself in trouble. Give him enough rope to hang himself. Though all men should deny thee, I won't. Bam! He's the first one who does it. And then you meet him twice and don't say a word to him. Then when you come to him the third time, you find him not in the upper room working out his salvation with fear and trembling, but out here, Mr. Head of the boat. I'm going fishing. Well, we're going with you. Well, good, boys. Come on, follow me. And you get him out there and let him show the fullness of his pride, his arrogance. He hadn't got anybody to condemn him. All these guys are yes men. You don't go up against Peter. He just got that kind of personality. Jesus said, yeah, that's the kind of personality I want him to have, but I want to bring him down to the place where he's usable. And he brings him back to the place where he can say to him, follow me. And it took all that ministry, Peter's denial, going out and weeping bitterly, all of this happened, and then the Holy Spirit reveals it to John, not to Peter. And those words that John said, it is the Lord, in verse 7, stuck in Peter's heart like a dagger. And he did what they do in Revelation 20 and verse 11 when Jesus Christ comes and gonna come and confront you. He jumped into the water, and the water is a picture of the masses of human flesh, and that's what it says in Revelation 20 and verse 11. They fled away. And Peter said, oh my goodness, hide me. That's what they're going to holler at the end of the age. To the rocks and mountains, fall on me and hide me from the wrath of the Lamb. But I'm so glad, dear soul, even though I'm a Peter, not with his abilities and all that, but, you know, doing my own thing my own way and asking God to bless it. I'm so glad that prior to the great white throne of authority, where Jesus comes and is the judge of all the earth and has that fire in his eyes, and the heaven and the earth flee away, that I'll be one by the mercy and grace of Almighty God that can bow before his throne and name him as my Lord and Savior. No matter what you're going through, Christian, it's the purpose of God Almighty to bring you to a place where he can bring you to glory. Not to glory like I'm going to Jonesboro, but to the condition of being glorified. Well, here we go, verse 20. Then Peter, what's the next two words?
Turning about.
There he goes again. He's going to turn about again. We go fishing. I'm turning about. Turning about. Seeth the disciples whom Jesus loved following. And he's thinking, well, you know what? Me and the Lord got this thing straightened out. And he must have been a little bit jealous of John knowing it was the Lord before anybody else did. And then wanting to show everybody that he was right back in authority with Jesus. He said, what about this fella? As if Peter had any right to question what another disciple was going to do. So Jesus it said, then Peter turning about, seeing the disciple whom Jesus loved following, which also leaned on his breast at supper and said, Lord, which is he that betrayeth thee? Peter seeing him saith to Jesus, Lord, what shall this man do? And Jesus takes him to task again. Jesus saith unto him, if I will that he tarry till I come, that ain't none of your business. And what are the last three words of verse 21?
Follow thou me.
What are the last two words of verse 19?
Follow
What did Jesus say in Matthew chapter 4 when he first commissioned them to come and leave their fishing? Follow me. Same song, third verse. Peter, you denied me 3 times. I'm going to ask you if you love me 3 times. You can't seem to get it on your head that you're not John's Lord. You're not the bishop. I don't care what Rome says. You're not the bishop. You're not in charge of anybody's soul. Do not allow your conscience to be brought into bondage under any man. Respect God's men, but they ain't God. And God's men, you should never require anybody to follow you, but only as you follow the Lord. So he had to tell Peter 3 times, follow me, follow thou me. Evidently, Peter was a man of 3s. And John said, let me straighten something out since I'm writing this book. Verse 23, then went this saying abroad among the brethren, that disciple should not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him, he shall not die, but if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? And y'all know this is the disciple which testifies of these things and wrote these things. And therefore you know that what I write you is true, because I have proved myself to be truthful in everything. That's what it said. So it was time to grow up. Jesus met him as the day began to dawn, and they had the last hard day of the Old Testament economy. Darkness was upon the face of the deep, toiled all night, caught nothing, following the wrong man. It's not Moses we ought to follow, it's Christ. Because Moses is Christ, I got it right. Moses is Christ's servant. And there was Peter, going to bring him to the dawn of the New Testament age. When the morning was come, Jesus saith unto them, children. And while they were children, they spake as a child, they thought as a child, they acted as a child, but now, follow me, follow thou me 3 times. Now, they need to put away childish things. And Peter, you're going to have a scope from being young to being old. And you need to learn how to grow in grace and in the knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. I think that's in Peter's writings. Look at 2 Peter 3. Verses 17 and 18. 2 Peter 3, 17 and 18. Ye therefore, beloved, seeing ye know these things before, beware lest ye also, listen, being led away with the error of the wicked, fall from your steadfastness like I fell from mine. Said that ain't in my Bible. Yeah, I know it ain't. I'm just preaching. The first word in verse 18 is but. If you ain't going to do that, here's what you're going to have to do. What's the first word after the word but? Grow. Children, have you any meat? No. Time to grow up. Peter, you were young, and you're going to be old. And you need to grow up and understand how to be a servant of the Lord. But grow in grace and grow in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To him be glory both now and forever. Amen. Wonder how come Peter came to write those 2 verses as the end of his second and final epistle. Lord, what shall this man do? That ain't none of your business. Follow thou me. It's time to grow up. You need to put away childish things, and you need to understand And you know what? One of the most scary and severe lessons that you can possibly have is God not speaking to you while you're eating his fish. God took care of you. You're not naked. You're not been brought to shame. You're doing well in this world with the physical things, natural things. And he has yet something to say to you, but just like that loved one you don't want to get close to out there at that wedding or that funeral that you have had odds with, you just rather not get close to them. They ate in silence because you had seen Jesus. Peter's seen him twice, and he didn't say a word to him. And he goes to bed every night. What is he thinking? What is he going to do to me? How does he feel about what I did? And finally, brings him all the way back around to fishing, nets, Sea of Galilee, boats, the whole thing, and brings Peter to an absolute end of his physical fishing livelihood. And says, now I want you to understand, you're not a fisherman of fish anymore. I want you to understand that what I told you from the beginning and what I made you to be, a fisherman, is there in order for you to understand the spiritual things and come all the way around to where you know now that you're to be a fisher of men. And where do you find Peter next? In the upper room. Isn't that something? Acts 1:4, right across your page. And being assembled together with them, commanded them that they should not depart from Jerusalem, but wait for the promise of the Father, which, saith he, ye have heard of me. You say, but Peter's name ain't mentioned. Right. He ain't the issue no more. The Holy Ghost is the issue. Got him straight now. He's in the upper room with Mary and the women. In the upper room with those we might call lesser disciples who may not have ever become to be one of the 12 apostles. But he's there. And so we find that the Lord brings him down to a place to where he can eat his breakfast in an atmosphere of guilt, an atmosphere of silence, and where God can bring him to the place where he understands what's happening to him. Let's finish out Luke 23. Make it Luke 22. Something that Peter had to think on after all this was over and done with. Luke 22, verse 31. And the Lord said, Simon, Simon. See, you have to tell Peter twice, at least twice, sometimes 3 times. I want you to know something. You are a person, Simon. You know I'm a human being, I'm a person. Satan is a person. So I want you to know Satan, and I know his desires. He has desired to have you. He don't want you but only because I chose you. But he's after you, that he may sift you. You know, he was the Lord's wheat, but he let the devil sift him. And Peter had to think, you know, when I was warming myself by the world's fire and cussing Jesus, that was the devil in me sifting me. But God didn't leave me there. Can you think of the worst pit you ever been in, and when you denied God, and God should have cast you off then, but you go back and you say, thank you, Lord, every time you think of it. And Peter had to have this in his mind. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith that I have given you, the faith that is a gift of God, fail not. And when thou art converted, and it took all this to convert him. You only get saved one time, but you can be converted dozens of times. Well, I used to feel like this about that, but the Lord showed me different. That was a conversion. Now I feel like this about that, but the Lord's teaching me more about that, so that you're being converted. He's changing you, growing you up. But when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. Peter, you love me? Lord, you know all things. Well, you can't prove you love me because I'm going to be gone. But there's going to be a lot of people. And there's going to be Gentiles going to come to you, and you know how much you don't like Gentiles. And they're going to ask you to come down and show them the way of salvation. And the first words out of Peter's mouth down there in Joppa was, y'all know it ain't right for me being a Jew, be here with you Gentiles. And he still can't keep his mouth shut. But the Lord has shown me not to call any man. He didn't show him man, he showed him beasts and animals in that sheet. But he got it. He remembered fish are men, and I'm a fisher of man. And the gospel is a net. So when he had that sheet come down, God said, don't you dare call anything common and unclean, you knucklehead, after I've cleansed it with my blood on Calvary. And Peter said, the Lord has showed me not to call any man common and unclean. He's still working on us, ain't he? Brother Ed or Brother Jamie? Jamie's pointing up here.